something I actually heard on, it might have been an old Joe Rogan podcast, but he was, I don't know how evidence-based a lot of the stuff on there is, and I'd say that's putting it kindly, but he was talking about, who was he seeing? I don't know. Somebody, I don't know. He was just like shooting the shit with somebody, and he was talking about Stevia. And he was like, oh, well, Stevia, it's an all natural, so I love that I can just have it and know that like there's, nothing unnatural in my system. And so two things about it. One, I guess a few things. One is, do we have research on Stevia, its effects on the gut microbiome? Two, just a quick anecdote was that so for a long time, I was eating like a lot of oatmeal, cottage cheese, and my friend would joke that like there was nothing too sweet for me, because if I had a cup of oatmeal, it would be like 7 packs of Splenda, I would say. And like this was in college, and I would literally just like when I was in the dining hall, just like take a bunch of it back with me. And I would probably have, like, this is when I was like tracking everything on Fit Day, I would probably have between like 20 and 30 packs of Splenda every single day. And I mean, that's definitely getting up there. And somebody had suggested like, oh, well, like, why don't you try taking them out? So I was like, well, let me try replacing it with Stevia. And honestly, like, my gut definitely felt worse when I did that. I was definitely like more bloated, like it didn't feel good. And then when I stopped doing that and I went back to, Splenda and Equal, I actually felt better. And then the last point about all that is that if you go in stores, at least when I've looked at like traditional grocery stores, it seems like it's almost impossible to find just like pure stevia. It seems like it's always got like maltodextrin in it, erythritol. Like it's just to find just stevia seems pretty hard anyway. So, and I would imagine that whatever Joe Rogan had also had some of these other things in it. So, thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have posted a couple infographics on Instagram. I did one that was on the artificial sweeteners, and then I did another one on the non-nutritive sweeteners that are like sugar alcohols and things that are considered to be like more natural. So the potential for really anything to affect the majority of our microbiome really relies on it reaching the large intestine and then being metabolized in some way by the bacteria there, by the microbes there, not all bacteria. So it's kind of funny because people are thinking that like, oh, the natural things are better. So doing like, naturally occurring sugar alcohols or using stevia are going to be safer than using something that's artificial, like Splenda, which is sucralose, or like aspartame. And it's actually really kind of the reverse.
Yeah.
So to preface this, we really only have a couple studies in humans in every case. Like across the board, we start in cell culture, and all of these compounds have pretty significant effects in cell culture because we're giving them super physiological doses that we could never ingest. Then we get to mouse studies and animal studies in general. We find that the effects are far more modest compared to cell culture. And in that case, we may see things like, perturbations in glucose handling and markers of inflammation and things like that. But still, in most cases, we're looking at super physiological doses. So when we get to human data, we find that, okay, now we're using more reasonable doses. And in most cases, we don't see any effects. Now, the one study that was promoted a lot was a study by Suez. I want to say it was just a few years ago. And they, in a very, very small group of people, so they had like 7 individuals. I think 3 or 4 of those individuals had perturbations in insulin sensitivity. So super small study. We didn't have like controls. Like it was just not a well-formed study.
With what compound?
This was with saccharin.
Okay.
So then they did fecal transplants, and from these donors who became insulin resistant, placed those into mice, and then the mice saw the similar insulin resistance. And so what it looks like is there might be some small subset of sort of responders to a select few of these artificial sweeteners. They may see changes in the microbiome, and perhaps that could modulate insulin sensitivity. But as a whole, when we're looking at kind of normal intake of the artificial sweeteners, most of them don't do anything at any level. They're not affecting the microbes. They're not affecting any sort of hormones produced in the gut. They literally go in one end and out the other, because they may not be structurally metabolizable. So like our enzymes don't work on them. The bacterial enzymes don't work on them. People have to understand that in order to, for something to have an effect, it has to interact with an organism in some way. So
Right,
like,
sure.
if it just goes right through, it's not going to do anything. So like aspartame doesn't really seem to do anything. Same thing with like sucralose. Pretty much all of the artificial sweeteners don't interact with those microbes. Like they can't do anything with them. Whereas if we look at the sugar alcohols, like erythritol, well, erythritol actually isn't fermentable, but like xylitol, maltitol, some of these are FODMAPs also. They're
Yeah.
highly fermentable, especially sorbitol. Sorbitol is just going to give pretty much everyone like uncomfortable gas, bloating, and diarrhea. And with these sugar alcohols, they actually have what's called like a laxative dose. So like above, a certain amount per day, you're going to have a laxative dose, or you're going to have a laxative effect. And that's actually pretty easy to achieve if you're eating a lot of like diet foods. Now, those actually can impact the microbiome, sometimes in positive ways, because if they're fermentable, that means that it's being used as an energy source by the microbes. So that's cool. But if you have chronic diarrhea because you're using these too much, not cool, because that can actually flush out some of the luminal microbes, so the ones that hang out actually in the tube of your intestines rather than the mucus. So stevia, I mean, part of the reason that you don't see pure stevia extract is that it actually has a pretty low acceptable daily intake level and can actually have problematic effects. And especially if you're using just the pure extract. And so they cut it so that it's not, so potentially, I don't want to say dangerous, but I guess that's the word for it. Now, there's no human data on stevia use in the microbiome. So all we have thus far is like a single cell culture study that showed that it was suppressive of a few beneficial strains. But again, I mean, cell culture studies are kind of bogus. So we really don't know what the effects are. But because it reaches the colon and it is heavily metabolized by microbes there, they're producing a few different compounds from that. Absolutely, it has the potential to have an effect on your microbiome. And so, yeah, like when if you want to make the choice based on, is this going to affect those microbes, then you really want to go for the artificial sweeteners. And that's what I do. Like I use acesulfame K or aspartame, because like that looks like it has the most minimal effect, the least potential for any effect. And we've got human data on that too. And even like in rodent studies, a lot of them don't show that it's going to do anything unless you're giving like insane doses, like we were doing decades ago, and they were like, oh, it causes bladder cancer. But yeah, like the ADI for those, I kind of gave equivalents for like 150-pound person, anywhere from like, it depends on the compound, but anywhere from like 35 to 60 packets a day. Like it would be really hard to reach that. So, and even if you do reach the ADI, that's still set many magnitudes of times lower than what we actually saw in rodents having an effect. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I definitely reached 35 some days. But I did switch over from Splenda to Equal just because it wasn't, like there was not a ton of evidence for issues with it. But at the time, Splenda was kind of touted like, oh, like, well, sucralose, it's, it's better for you than aspartame. But I think if anything, there's maybe a little bit more research showing that there are some gut issues from sucralose. What else was I going to say there? Oh, it's just as far as like, I guess plain devil's advocate, what some people would say is that, okay, we're not detecting issues with normal amounts, right? We don't see it, but not everything is going to be detected, in blood work or in this 6-week sample. But, if this dose is a problem, wouldn't a smaller dose be a problem over years? We don't have 20-year studies, maybe 20-year study, which, well, I have my own thoughts on it, but I want to hear what your thoughts are first.
Well, we'd have to assume that like it's going to accumulate in the body in some way. And they actually do study, I mean, before this stuff even reaches the market, there are usually close to a decade's worth of research. And, yeah, we're not taking it out for like tens of years and whatnot, but like usually it's many weeks or months, and we're looking for, what's excreted in the urine and in the feces. So in these cases, like we actually can say, okay, 97% of it is excreted in the feces and the other 3% of it is excreted in the urine. So literally it's in your body for, a matter of hours, and it may not be metabolized at all. Like, so just literally in one end, out the other within the matter of, a few hours or however long it takes for, full gastric transit. So we do have that kind of data to look at like whether there's any bioaccumulation, and we can say about these things that there isn't. But if there was something that was bioaccumulating, yeah, certainly there's risk. But we can say that about like fat soluble vitamins, and people aren't like,
Sure.
like they're not afraid of supplementing with A, D, E, and K, and like, yeah,
Which
that
maybe
actually.
even that one, they maybe should be, right? I mean, there are some issues with that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. If they listen to this, they might get annoyed. But my mom would. My brother used to be like huge on 5 Hour Energies, and like
Oh.
I should post up a picture of like this ridiculous. He had like 100 of them laid out one time,
Oh my
and
God.
I think my mom, we would go grocery shopping. My mom refused to buy them because she was like, "Well, I might as well just be buying you a pack of cigarettes." And I was like, "Mom, you
Wow.
drink coffee and you take a multivitamin. That's basically what that is. Like, it's
Oh
just."
my gosh.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's just, and it doesn't matter how many times I'll explain it or show the information on diet soda. Well, it's unnatural chemicals, and I don't know, man. There's only so many times I can explain it. So.
Yeah. And I love to point out with aspartame, like it's made of 2 amino acids. Like
Mhm.
really, it's just pretty much a dipeptide. Like, yeah, it's man-made, but like, come on, I mean,
Yeah.
at a molecular level, there are very few things that would like in the food supply that are like really going to mess you up, at the
Sure.
amounts that we're eating.